everybody, welcome to our recap video of our third Zoom embroidery class. We covered 2 stitches in this class. We learned a weaving technique that you do on top of the fabric. The stitch doesn't really have a name. You're just sort of making your own loom on top of the fabric here. And then the second stitch that we learned is called the raised or embossed stem stitch. So this here is 3 rows of this stitch. So we're going to learn those 2 things. They're fairly similar in technique. On my Corky bird, I used this weaving technique to fill in this little section of my guy's wing. And I used the weaving technique down here to do this big section of like grass, kind of looks like a basket here. And then this light green strip at the top is that raised stem stitch. So you can choose to put this wherever you want on your Corky bird. The raised stem stitch works well in sort of a narrow strip. And then this basket weave works well in a simple closed shape of any shape that you want. It can get narrow on the ends, it can get wider on the ends, but again, we sort of talked about this before, you don't want to have like an amoeba shape to fill this, to fill this stitch. So something simple. So we're going to start with the basket weave stitch. I'm going to come over here to my little demo hoop. And if you're doing your wing shape, it's going to be a little like half circle, or if you want to do a little hill, that's also going to be a little half circle. I'm going to show you how to do it. So if you're doing like your little hill underneath your bird, it can be like that. I'm going to do this in sort of like a leaf shape that gets skinny on both ends, just to show you how that works. And again, to show you this one more time, here's the shape I did it over here. And here's the shape in the wing. But you can also just, it doesn't have to be in a shape that's already defined by thread. You can just draw the shape on your fabric. So you can use as many colors as you want for this stitch. I'm going to work with 3 for the demo today, but you can work with 2. You really want to work with at least 2 to get the visual effect. But you can work with 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. I'm going to show you a couple more examples so you can see what color choices you want to have. So this is something that I'm working on personally. This N was done in a few different color combos with this stitch, but over here where this where the yellow and green stripes are really prominent, I used yellow and green alternating for my horizontal threads, and then I went back and I did yellow and green alternating for my vertical threads. So that'll become clear in a second, but just so you can see yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow, green for that. And then over here for this, these are all 3 of these little tiny shapes are the same stitch that we're going to learn with different color combos. This one here is 2 colors, horizontal threads in yellow, vertical threads in orange. This one is orange for one way, and then alternating blue and orange the other way. And this one is 3. So orange for all of my vertical threads, alternating blue and yellow for my horizontal threads. So you can just see same stitch, huge difference visually. But I say today, just play and get the technique down. So you've got your shape. You're going to start with one color. I'm going to use this yellow. I'm using the Pearl Cotton 3. This is the fat thread that you have in your kit. You can use anything for this. I'm going to use Pearl Cotton 3 because it's very easy for you to see. So what I'm going to do is we're creating a loom on our fabric. So I'm going to choose in my shape, I'm going to choose the shorter length to make my, like these. I'm going to make my little warp threads. If you have a loom, you have warp, which is the threads that you weave the other threads through. So I'm going to start down here. Never a bad idea to start in the middle at your widest point. And the reason for that is, oh, let me make this camera big for you. Y'all don't need to look at my face while I do this. There we go. So you want to pick your sort of widest point. And the reason for that is because the angle of your first warp thread here is the one you're going to try to stick with. You want to lay these down parallel to each other. So if you pick the widest one, it's sort of easier to see the angle you've got. Put that down here. You can see the back. I've got my little knot over here, nice and taut. Comes out over here. Then I'm just going to go one direction. Okay, the spacing on this, how far apart these are, is totally an aesthetic decision. I could just have 3 if I wanted, but the more I want my yellow to show. So I'm going to lay down a fair bit of these yellow stitches. Okay, trying to keep it parallel, trying to keep them evenly spaced. It's not perfect, that's okay. So I'm just following my pencil line from edge to edge. And it helps to sort of find your angle if you want to lay your thread down like this. And then once that looks parallel, put your needle in. So on the back, you can see there's very little happening here. And on once we lay down our weaving stitches, there's still going to be very little happening back here. So because of that, I'm going to be a little bit lazy. And instead of just knotting this yellow off and then starting again over here, I'm just going to cross over because I know that that's not going to get in my way with this stitch. I'm going to come back over here and lay my warp threads down on the other side. Okay, now I am going to tie a knot. Finish this off. There's not a stitch that's very close to do this. So I might want to tie a double knot to make sure it stays tight. There we go. All right, now I'm ready to weave. I've made my loom on my fabric. Okay, so I'm going to pick a second color. I've got this nice brown color. Now, again, I'm going to start at the widest point. So I'm going to start in the middle to do my weaving. I've got my warp threads laid down horizontally. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to weave in a perpendicular fashion. So I'm coming up at my point. If you don't have a shape that has like a very obvious widest point, just start somewhere in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to aim to come over here, but I'm going to weave in and out of these threads. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to thread it eye first so I don't catch my fabric. I'm going to go under, over, under, over, under, over. Okay. So you can see how this is alternating under, over, under, over, under, over. Okay. Get my angle right, because again, I'm going to try to stay perpendicular to this first thread. Got my point here that I want to go in, so that helps. There we go. Now I'm going to move to my second color. Fabric's coming loose in my hoop. So for my second color, well, I guess it's my third color, but the second color I'm going to weave with, I've got this blue. So I'm going to come over here, come up right next to where I came up with my brown on my pencil line, and I want to come up right next to it. There we go. Okay. Pull that taut, make sure my knots are good. They are. Okay, now I'm going to do the opposite. So this one started by going under my yellow. That means this one's going to go over, and then I'm going to go under here on this one. So I'm doing the opposite. This is just like weaving on any kind of loom. So the trickiest part of this stitch is keeping you've got multiple needles going in your fabric. So you just want to sort of make sure that you're keeping those clear of each other and they aren't getting tangled when you're not paying attention. Okay, so there's that. Once you get a few of these going, I'm just going to come back on the opposite side now so I don't have to waste thread. On our satin stitch, we sort of looped around underneath, which uses a lot of thread. You don't need to do that here. Okay, so I'm coming back the opposite way. This one ended under, so I'm going to start over. And I'm going to go back through right next to my blue one over here. Okay, so that's it. That is how you weave. And then as the more lines you get on, you can start sort of pushing these together so that you get a nice tight basket on those. And again, here's one that was half done. So once you get all the way to one side of your shape, then you're just going to move over and start here and go to the other side. And just, you know, when you get to your ending spot, just knot off your threads and you're done. Easy peasy. Okay. I'm going to get these threads out of my way and we'll move on to the embossed stem stitch. And you don't know the actual like not embossed stem stitch yet, but don't worry, we're going to learn that when we do our flower sampler next time. Okay, so for this one, like I said, you want it to sort of be in a long, narrow shape. This can be a shape that curves, it can be a straight line, it can actually go in loop-de-loops, but you want it to be a narrow, long spot. So I've done the exact same thing that I did over here where I laid down my warp threads going in the direction of the narrowest space. You can see the back there, hardly any real estate on the back. So to start that, I'm going to pick my second color. I'm going to work with this yellow. So this stitch, typically you would actually do the same color threads. You want to sort of hide these. So you would use the same color thread. Now, you don't have to, of course, this is an aesthetic choice, but traditionally, if I laid down these threads in red, I would be doing my weaving in red as well. But for the sake of this video and you being able to see what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and use this contrasting color. Now, the other thing that to keep in mind with this is if you have a disappearing ink pen, you don't need to worry about it. I used a pencil here. I'm not going to fully cover these pencil lines necessarily with my stitches. So you want to do those really, really light if you're not using something that's going to go away on its own. So I've laid down my warp stitches. Here they are. We're going to call these railroad tracks for the sake of this demonstration. Okay, I am sitting here. If I'm a train, the train is going away from me down the railroad tracks. Okay, so my thread, I'm going to start here in the middle behind my first track. I'm going to pull that through. Now for this first stitch, I'm going to skip this first track. I'm going to go up here. And my thread train is actually going to go underneath this second track. And all I'm going to do is I'm leading with the eye of my needle. I'm going to slide this back towards myself underneath the track. So this is underneath this thread. And I'm going to go from a right to a left. And I'm always going to do that, sort of like with our whip stitch. Whichever way you start, just keep doing that. Okay. It doesn't matter if you want to go from left to right if you're left-handed. That's fine. Just be consistent. So again, here's my thread. Here's my needle. I first, underneath the second track, back towards myself. So I'm looping it underneath from top to bottom. That's it. Okay. One loop. I don't go through anything. I'm not doing a loop. It's super simple. Went underneath and over here to the side. Now to do the next one, same thing. I'm going to go eye first, underneath the track, right to left. Okay. And then I just sort of want to push it over so that they're next to each other. Again, next one, underneath, top to bottom, right to left. You just want to be sort of steering clear of your extra thread here. You're not trying to loop through it. There you go. That's that. Okay, now if I'm going to come back the other way, I can turn this around and start over. I'm keeping my direction the same. Top to bottom, right to left. Now the only thing, it gets a little trickier because I have to avoid this line of threads that I've already done. So underneath, and I'm going to stay on top of this one. So don't loop under that one by mistake. There you go. That's that. Now I can come back. I'm going to come out under here, just sort of getting that out of the way. And then I'm going to come back. Oops. There we go. Okay, so I just keep doing that until I cover my line of warp stitches. So see here, I accidentally kind of looped through my tail thread. I don't want to do that. I want to keep it out of the way. All right, and then when I want to end, let's say I've come back and done all of that, I just pop underneath my fabric and tie a knot like I always do. That's that. These are easy. They just take some time because you're covering a lot of ground with your thread. But you can really play with these and play with the colors that you use. They're just really, really fun, different, unique stitches that you can do. So this embossed stem stitch can be a little tricky. It's a little directionally challenging sometimes. It's hard to sort of convey on video. So if you're having any trouble with this, let me know and I can help. But just to give you a little diagram on paper of what this stitch looks like, your stitches are on your rungs here, your tracks. And your first stitch looks like this. It's at a slight angle. And your second stitch, when it comes up, is like this. So they sort of sit like this on the fabric, even though they sort of appear to be in a straight line. And the key here is that it ends on the right side and then originates over here on the left. Ends on the right, originates on the left. Ends on the right, originates on the left. Again, if yours is in reverse, that's fine. It just matters that you are consistent in the angle that you're putting your needle into the fabric. So that's everything that we learned in class 2. If you are interested in finishing off your embroidery because you love your quirky bird so much, you want to give it to someone as a gift or you want to hang it on a wall, I'm going to show you in a separate video how to mount this and make it nice and finished on the back so that your person that you give it to doesn't see this mess. Okay, so that'll be in the next video. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time for starting our flower stitch sampler. Bye.